Good day, my dear students. Welcome to another week of biology with Mr. Miguel. This week we will be looking at human nutrition. More specifically, we will be looking at the journey from the mouth to the anus. Before we start, it is only right to review a little bit. What do we know about nutrition? Well, from the kingdoms of life and from the tree of life, we have learned that there are different forms of nutrition. Humans in particular have a type of nutrition that is known as heterotrophic nutrition. And the word hetero means other or opposite. Troph refers to feeding. So, if you look at the word itself, it's saying that humans feed by relying on others. So we consume other organisms. But more specifically, how do we carry out this endeavor? We consume other organisms by grabbing the foodstuff and placing it into our mouth. That in itself tells us that humans practice holozoic nutrition. Whole. This means that you put the entire food material into your mouth. It goes through the digestive system in order to break down the food substance. So let us compare ourselves a little bit with plants. So humans versus plants. Plants are known to be autotroph because auto means self and troph means feeding. So plants are known to be self-feeding, so they're known as autotrophs. We consume others, that's why we're known as heterotrophs. And the type of nutrition that we exhibit is holozoic nutrition. Now let us look at objective number 1, which is to describe the 6 major digestive processes involved in the digestive system. So many times, when we hear digestion, we only think of one process. But I need you to think of it as a series of processes that happen to break down the food material in order for our body to be able to absorb it. It starts with ingestion. Before you even see the food, just smelling the food, sometimes just smelling the freshly baked bread can make your mouth water. So digestion starts before you even put anything in your mouth. But the first process of digestion is known as ingestion. And that's when you put food into your mouth. So the process in which you put food into your mouth, that is known as ingestion. And that's the first process associated with digestion. Then we have propulsion. This means as you put it in your mouth and you swallow, there are various things happening here. The food is being moved around inside of the mouth. When you swallow it, it goes into the esophagus and until it reaches the stomach. The process in which food moves through the digestive system is referred to as propulsion. And that is the second process associated with digestion. The third is mechanical breakdown. And mechanical breakdown is physically breaking down food substances into smaller chunks. This means that if you grab a burger and you bite it, so you took a whole foodstuff and you broke it down physically, you took a piece physically, and with your teeth you are grinding and cutting this food material in order to physically make it smaller. As it moves into the stomach churns the food with force. The muscles throughout the digestive system try to break down the food. This is known as mechanical breakdown, which is simply put, physically breaking down the food. Then we move on to digestion. This in particular is referring to chemical digestion, which means using chemicals. Your body produces chemicals. In some parts, we know them as enzymes, and these enzymes are like molecular scissors. They cut down the food at a molecular scale, and this is known as digestion or chemical digestion. How is this different than mechanical breakdown? Well, mechanical breakdown looks at breaking down the food physically. Meanwhile, digestion looks at breaking down the food material chemically in order for you to be able to move into the fifth state or the fifth process. The fifth process is known as absorption. Absorption is a process in which the nutrients found in food material are absorbed in the small intestine and in the large intestine. That is absorption. Finally, we move on to the last process in the journey, which is known as defecation. And defecation is practically going into the restroom and you ingesting whatever your body could not process. So that means all the food material that your body could not break down chemically gets taken out in a process that we know as defecation. And those are the processes associated with digestion. And when we look at human nutrition, it is only important to look at the digestive system. How is it structured? You need to bear in mind that the digestive system can be divided into two major groups. The first one is known as the alimentary canal, and the second one are accessory digestive organs. They work hand in hand in order for you to digest the food. But the alimentary canal refers to the tube. So the tube that starts on the mouth and ends at the anus, that is known as the alimentary canal or gastrointestinal tract. Accessory organs are those organs that are not part of the tube. That means that they are not part of the tube that starts with the mouth and ends at the anus. They are somehow connected to the tube, but they're not part of the tube. Let's take, for example, the liver. The liver is a huge organ. Food does not pass through the liver. Food passes through the esophagus and into the stomach, but not through the liver. The liver is found outside of the tube. That is why it is known as an accessory organ. And those are the two main divisions of the digestive system. So let us look at the alimentary canal. That's the first division of the digestive system that we will be looking at. We will start with the mouth. The mouth is a complex structure that contains many substructures, and that is what we will be looking at next. One of the first things that we look at when we look at the mouth are the lips. And the lips are those structures that protect the mouth. Sometimes they protect from a heavy impact, so they absorb shock. So tell that to boxers. Haha. The lips also serve to prevent animals or organisms to just freely enter the mouth. If you didn't have lips, imagine that. And you would have your mouth or your teeth apart. Flies could get in and out. You can get infections very easily. So that is what the lips do. You also have the cheeks, los cachetes, and the cheeks form the walls inside for the inside of the mouth so that food material does not leak out. You have the hard palate, and the hard palate, I want you to, with your finger, put your finger on the roof of the mouth, and you should be able to touch a very hard structure towards the front of the mouth. And that hard structure is made out of bone, is known as the hard palate. Then you also have the soft palate. And the soft palate, I want you to put your finger inside of your mouth again on the roof of your mouth and move towards the back. And you will finally reach an area that is very soft. And that is known as the soft palate. Then if you go way towards the back, you will find the uvula or the uvula, however you want to call it. And that is a fleshy little projection from the roof of your mouth. And that serves as an emergency button for you to vomit. The next part that we will be looking at is the tongue. Next time that you eat, I want you to notice what your tongue is doing, because your tongue helps and aids in the mixing of saliva with food, and it also helps in speaking. We also have the tonsils, which some of our Guatemalan students would know as las amígdalas. The tonsils are part of the lymphatic system, which function is to protect the body from infections. So the tonsils help in protecting you from infections. Salivary glands. And the salivary glands are those glands that produce saliva. It should be obvious. And you have three main salivary glands in your mouth. The ones that appear right at the front of your ear, those are known as the parotid glands or the parotid salivary glands. They produce massive quantities of saliva. Right under your mandibula, under your jaw, you can find very soft tissue there, and those would be the submandibular salivary glands. Under your tongue, you can also find sublingual salivary glands. So we know that saliva is very important for indigestion. How is this true? What is it made of? What is saliva? Saliva is primarily composed of water. It also has mucous proteins and serous fluids, which help in lubricating the food, so that once it mixes with the food, it makes the passage of food easier on the alimentary canal. And once you have chewed and are ready to swallow, you will notice that a little ball is formed. We call it bolus, however you want to call it. Es una pelotita, una bolita de comida, lo que tragamos, and that we know as bolus. But this saliva itself contains a type of enzyme that we know as salivary amylase, and salivary amylase helps us in the breakdown of carbohydrates. So the digestion or chemical digestion of carbohydrates commences in the mouth. It is also known that the watery component of saliva helps to dissolve the chemicals. It is a very rich solvent in which other materials can dissolve. And one of the things that I did not include in this presentation is that saliva also contains antimicrobial components. So it contains antimicrobial components which prevents infection. Your mouth also contains other accessory organs like the teeth. They're not really part of the tube. They emerge from your gums. And the teeth, their central role is mechanical breakdown or mastication. Your teeth tend to be sharp and some are dull because some teeth cut the food and others grind the food. The main purpose is that the food is broken down physically into smaller chunks. Humans, this should be no secret, but humans contain two sets of teeth. The deciduous teeth, also known as the milk teeth, those are the ones that babies are develop and they last until early childhood. And then you also have the permanent teeth, which are the teeth that stay with you for your whole life until someone either knocks it down or they start to fall off because of improper dental care. Permanent teeth, how many do we have? We have 32 teeth, and we will be looking at each tooth in specific. In this slide, we will be looking at teeth in more detail. Just to summarize, we have 4 main types of teeth. Yes, we have 32, but those 32 can be categorized into 4 major types of teeth. The first one The first tooth that we come across is the incisors, and the incisors are the front teeth. You have 4 at the bottom and 4 at the top of your mouth. It is those teeth, see? They tend to be very sharp and look like a chisel. This is what we know as a chisel, un cincel, as how you call it in Spanish. And this type of teeth help or function in cutting down food. We have a total of 8 in adults. The next type of teeth is canines. And canines, you call it colmillos. So the C stands for colmillos. They tend to be very sharp and pointy. They are fang-like. And they are known as canines. Dogs are known as canines because of their very conspicuous teeth. What is the function of the canine though? The function of the canine is to shred food or tear food. For example, meat. When you consume meat, it needs to be torn. So especially raw meat. So with the canine will pierce the meat and it will tear the meat. That is what canines do. Then we look at the premolars and the molars. And these are very different, yet very hard to distinguish. Just to distinguish, premolars would tend to have 2 cuspids. Mister, I don't know what a cuspid is. A cuspid is a pointed edge. If you notice from the diagram, this would be a premolar right there. It would have un cerrito aquí y un cerrito aquí. They are known as cuspids or 2 little pointed edges. And those 2 pointed edges are known as the cuspids. So I repeated it 3 times there. So premolars would tend to have 2 cuspids or 3 cuspids. Now, we have 2 premolars in each quadrant of the mouth. That means that on each side of the mouth, on the bottom left, on the bottom right, on the top left, you have 2 premolars, and this gives us a total of 8 premolars. Following to the back, we have the molars. What is so special about the molars? The molars, we have 12 molars, and they will tend to have 5 points or 5 pointed edges. In comparison with the premolars, they have more cuspids. Cuspids are pointed little edges. Okay? And if you notice from the diagram, we have 3. Now, the last tooth that comes out, that typically starts coming out when you are a teenager. And some people report very negative experiences with their wisdom tooth. That's how it is known. But what is the function of premolars and molars? The function of premolars and molars would be to grind food. So the first part of the mouth will cut the food. If you're eating meat, the canines will tear the food and pierce the food. And what the premolars and the molars would do, they would grind the food. They would grind it until it is a little bit more mushy. That's what the premolars and the molars do. So let us make a little bit of addition. We said that we have 8 incisors, 4 at the bottom and 4 at the top. Then we said that we have 4 colmillos or canines. Then we said that we have 8 premolars. And then we said that we have 12 molars. If we add them up, 8 plus 12, that's 20, plus 8, that is 28, plus 4. If you add them up, you come up to a total of 32 teeth in your mouth. And I want you to count how many teeth you have in your mouth. Personally, I have 29 teeth in my mouth. The other 3 wisdom teeth have not come out. Okay, now let us look at the structure of each tooth. Whatever part of the tooth that you're able to see on a person is known as the crown, la coronilla. That's all you're able to see from teeth. Underneath the crown, you will find more structures. The part of the tooth that attaches the gum to the tooth is known as the neck, and the part that is rooted inside of the alveolar bone of the gums is known as the root. And those are just the regions. Now let us look at individual parts. Let us start with the enamel. The enamel is the white part, and it's the hardest part of the tooth. It serves in the protection of underlying layers. That means it protects all the other layers of the tooth. It's very hard. It is made out of substances that are similar to bone. Underneath the enamel, we can find dentine. And the dentine is also very similar to bone. It's made out of a chemical known as hydroxyapatite. Dentine contains cells that actually replenish to a certain degree the enamel. So the dentine will contain some cells that will kind of like repair the enamel. Underneath the dentine, we have the pulp cavity, la pulpa. And the pulp cavity contains blood vessels. It contains nervous tissue. Why does it need to contain blood vessels? Well, if we have cells at the base of the dentine, someone needs to supply them with nutrients and gases. That would be the blood vessels found on the pulp cavity. We also have nervous tissue found within, and this nerve allows us to sense whether something is hot, cold, or if it's hard. It gives us that sensation that allows us to avoid objects that might damage the tooth. The bone is known as the alveolar bone. We also have the gum, also known as the gingiva. And when you hear I have gingivitis, what does that mean? It means that you have an inflammation of the gingiva, and the gingiva is the gum. We also have other structures which we won't really cover at this point. So to summarize, what happens inside of the mouth? Inside of the mouth, we chew. That is known as mechanical breakdown. Then the food material that we consume is mixed with saliva, and the saliva contains salivary amylase, which is used in chemical breakdown. You use the tongue to swallow, that is known as propulsion, and you taste the food. Is that a process? Not necessarily. So in the mouth, we have 4 processes going on. I will leave it at that for now. Have a blessed day, and thank you very much for your attention.